Hey guys, we're back here at Blueberry Hill. So thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're doing something a little different. We're playing with my track car, RX-8 with LS power 5.3, and I just recently moved the motor back 5 inches and swapping the tranny. The whole process started with a tranny swap, going to 5-speed instead of 4-speed. I had a Jerico in there, 4-speed. It was pretty okay. I love playing with that tranny, but not enough gear for, I run a Coda, so not enough gear for that. The car was slower because of it as well. I had to put a highway gear in it to compensate for the 4-speed. So all that's gonna get redone. So we went with a TKX Tremec 5-speed, and that should get us the gearing we need. So here we are, we're unboxing the shifter package. It's pretty nice. They, you know, if you look at the different videos on YouTube, they have different versions of the box, but here's the shifter handle, a couple of thingies, that's empty. I did get the light indicator and a sensor and hardware, of course. This is a reverse lockout handle, and the hardware to go in it. Here's that little cam that has to go in that shifter area. So this has to slip in here, and it requires a slight modification to the tunnel there. So we'll see how that goes. Also a couple of shims to space things out properly. We'll see how that goes. They say it may not be necessary, so we'll figure it out. They're a different thickness. That's the top plate. It's upside down, so that would be like that. And the shifter mounts to that. So the shifter itself, it's got a forward shift action and a cam action that moves that barrel, this barrel right here, for the H pattern part, and the up and down for 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I guess 5 as well. But anyway, so the mod is to allow this to fit in the tunnel here, where the stock shifter is, and there's supposed to be a mild recess that I have to put in there. Just grind it away, so we'll see how that goes. So to begin the install, you have to take pins out of the shift fork and the pins out of the guides for each gear. There's basically 5 pins that have to get knocked out. You can't see one of them, it's below what I'm doing. And I'm using an Allen socket to punch them out. It was perfect size. I don't have a punch set, so go figure. Anyway, once we do that, we can slide the whole back of the tranny off. So those components have to come out to get to the last pin, and you'll see that in a second. So here I'm just going to break the case open. I sped it up this time just so you don't watch me do one bolt at a time. Anyway, it's fairly easy, just 12mm bolts, no big deal. There's quite a few of them. The bottom ones seem to be have a little bit of gasket material on them, so I guess the gear oil doesn't leak out if that's even a thing. But anyway, they're all the same size, thankfully, so it should be easy to reassemble. Anyway, we're going to crack the case open, and then you're going to see me play with the pins a little bit more, because I didn't knock them out quite far enough. And once you knock them out far enough, you can wiggle the shift mechanisms, and everything slides real easy. The one for the actual shifter I'm leaving in there until the back of the tranny is off. So you have to remove the neutral switch and the sensors on that side of the tranny.
Sketchy table.
So we can pull
We're making room for the
units apart.
Sensors in here.
So bolts are removed from the case, and I'm trying to separate them. And then I noticed that I didn't quite punch the pins out far enough. So you punch them out a little further, and then you can wiggle each one of the forks. And once that happens, the case just splits apart. There we go.
There we go. And we got ourselves a split tranny. Okay. Roll that up the plate off. One side and the other. So I'm back. By the way, I don't have a pin set, so we're using an Allen key that's the perfect size of hole. I don't destroy. Drop all the way through. Save that over here. Not too many parts, obviously. Now, remove this pin. By the way, I did this just to lodge it over so I can get the pin out. Okay, now we So there's a small hole at the underneath the forks that the pin will fall through. If you don't have it over the hole, you might lodge the shifter against the case. So make sure it's over the hole. It should fall in the. There you go. In the tunnel. Yep. So after the pin is punched out, you try to slide the shaft out. It's very slippery. Everything's kind of greased up. So I had a little trouble taking that apart. Anyway, finally got it, and then I start prepping it to do the cuts that I need to, and those cuts were I'm going to explain in the next little segment. It's the middle where the middle bolts go in to the shifter area right there. So anyway, finally got it apart. Then I'm going to clean it up and tape off anything that filings get into to keep everything nice and clean. Some very nice bearings in there. So here's the tranny all taped up, ready to go. I'm taking the cam, I call it a cam, it's a cam barrel, whatever. And then that actually slides the forks forward and backwards, as well as rotates, so you can go from the gates from 1 to 2, 3 and 4, and then to 5. So there's a rotation and a sliding mechanism. So the clearances around the center bolts, I have to cut that off a certain amount. There's a couple of millimeters. They tell you exactly what to do in the instructions, how much to cut. So you have clearance for that barrel to slide on the shaft and engage all the gears. So it's hard to see, but I actually scribed the area I have to grind off, and I'm going really slow. This is a 6-inch cutoff disc. It's maybe a little bit oversized for this particular cut. You can see I just touched the case a little bit with it on the back side, not a big deal. But you see all the shavings, so you have to keep all that out of there's very, very small ball bearing races for the shaft to slide on. You don't want any of this crap in there. It has to be nice and clean. So it's pretty straightforward to do that. And just to make, again, this is all for just making the clearance for that barrel to move easily in the hole. So I'm using some calipers to measure the depth of the cut and make sure I'm over far enough. They give you the exact measurements in the instructions. I'll leave that to that. They're stated in there. It's only a few millimeters that you have to recess, so everything's pretty straightforward. So I moved very slowly. I wasn't in a hurry, and that's so you don't make any mistakes. So nice and steady. You notice I'm not wearing gloves. Typically I wear gloves when I'm grinding any kind of metal, but this was small enough to not worry about it. And I'm just going to smoothen everything out. You don't want any sharp edges and stuff, so I'll just take it and grind it down just a little bit more. And now I swap over to the other side, and on this side the bolt holes don't go all the way down to the, it's not like a flat wall of the case. There's actually kind of a detent where the bolts stop, and I cut into that, so I actually exposed the outside of the case to the inside just a little bit, but enough to, oopsie, the instructions didn't cover any of that. I didn't look at it carefully enough, so I went too deep. You can see that right there. So when I cut that piece off, you're going to see light coming through it. I'm going to fix that with JB Weld. It's not a structural component, the proper JB Weld for metal, and we'll close that off to the elements. Not a big deal, but I wish I would have been paying a little bit more attention on that. So here's a little excessive grind on that side. I was supposed to stop before, of course, it reached that area, but nevertheless, JB Weld will fix that, and we're good to go. So before this assembly, blow everything off, make sure everything's super clean. Then I take the tape off and start putting stuff back together. So the instructions call for chamfering a couple of the bolt holes. Basically those two that I'm doing there. And that's for the top plate goes on there with beveled bolts, so that's for that.
That's enough. Not, we'll do more.
So time for reconstruction. So we're putting the cam on the main shaft, the shifter shaft, and it's kind of hard to maneuver with this thing because there's nothing flat on these trannies except for the actual mount on the transmission snub right there. So everything was moving around. Of course, I have the camera on the table I'm whacking on, so it was moving around a little bit. Sorry about that.
Alright, that's in. Nothing's flat on these things. Go figure. Okay, so that moves like that. Now,
So before going crazy with this, I'm starting to lube things up as I have access to them. Here I put some synthetic grease on the shaft. The slide, it's going to be sliding back and forth. It's always good to lube up metal contact stuff, of course. I'm not sure how much fluid actually comes up from the case once we fill it with gear oil, how much of it will be in here. So I'm just lubing it up. I'm sure some will splash in here, but it doesn't seem like there's much of a recess for oil to get through. But anyway, I'm just putting a little bit here and there, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the forks and any other component that touches metal. So one thing I didn't mention, you can't really go wrong with how this thing goes together. There's pinholes in the shaft, there's detents on the shaft, and the instructions tell you where everything goes. Plus, everything is kind of offset from each other, so you can't put the wrong part with the shaft. So everything's pretty straightforward. Obviously, everything needs to run nice and smooth, and of course, engage all the shift mechanism once it's put back on the tranny. So the back of the tranny goes on, no problem. You just kind of leave it cracked open so you can put the shift mechanism back on their shaft. And there's 3 shafts, and you basically place them on there, and then you put the case back on with the bolts. I didn't tighten anything until I had everything kind of in place. I think I put 1 bolt in there to hold things together, and then I start putting the pins back in. You can't really go wrong because there's only 3 basic parts here. It's kind of a given which part goes where, and I do grease it up as well. You don't see any grease on there right now, but I'm going to grease them up because they had some heavy-duty dark grease. I like the red synthetic stuff, so Mobile One kind of stuff, and not a problem. Anyway, this was pretty straightforward, and then you start playing with it to put in the shifter itself. And FYI, this is what I ran into. You can't really move the forks very easily. It requires a little bit of effort. The shifter obviously does that. So with everything exposed and you're trying to move the shift forks around, they're really hard to move. I did manage to pry them and move them around to make sure they were still sliding everything. I mean, there's no reason they shouldn't be, but it was a little bit of a surprise on how much effort it actually takes. So the shifter's doing, you're using a lever action, so you're putting a little bit of force on that stuff. And I'll show you in a little bit, when you put the actual shifter on there, you have to bang it fairly hard, not hard, but it. So now we're putting the base plate onto the snout, and they basically, you can't go wrong with this. This only goes in one direction. They have beveled recesses in there because the shifter slides on top of that, and then big bolts hold it to this plate. Anyway, they made you countersink those bolt holes. Not 100% sure why, because those, I'm not sure the bolts actually go into the case or close enough to the case to matter, but it is what.
So hey guys, we're back. This is day 2 of the transmission switch for the sequential. We had a social thing last night, so here I'm back. So next phase is to open this up to position. There's a cam in here. We have to position in the right spot to get it to slip inside the hole right here. So the There's a shim that they say 1 millimeter is supposed to do it. I haven't tightened everything to spec, just tightened it good enough to give it a shot and try it out. So we're gonna put it all together and then see if the shifts work. There's some adjustability in there, so they're making us take this off, adjust, move the cam, put it in there, and then see how it works. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So now I'm gonna take the cover off the shifter to expose the slider mechanism that does the forward and rear shift part of the system. And then there's an arm that swings down on the bottom of the shifter that rotates the barrel to go between the gates. The 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th left to right part of the gate. So it all makes sense when you look at it. Interesting engineering. There's a lot of little pieces to this, so I can see why it's not so inexpensive, but very, very nicely built unit, I think. The fun part, you'll see a red cam here that drives this plate. This is a drive plate that does the forward shift, and I basically take the red cam you see down there and I rotate it to the downside. They kind of say to ratchet the shifter to make it go in the right spot. I didn't do that. I just kind of used my hand and popped it down so you can slide the unit into the transmission. Whatever works. So here I'm just putting on the reverse lockout lever, and it makes, once you put it together and play with the shifter, it makes perfect sense how it works. You just have to position it to where you want it. Right there, it's on the wrong side of the shifter. I actually redo it and move it to the front because it's on the back side. I guess whatever your flavor is, it basically just moves the lockout so you can't put it in reverse by accident when you're ratcheting. So time to put a shifter in for the first time. I didn't grease anything up on this, the cam or anything else. I'm just basically doing a dry fit. Now, if you know anything about aluminum, you can't really grind anything on aluminum. Nothing really slides on it. So I maybe should have put a tiny bit of grease on it to help with this. But you see there's a gasket underneath the plate, the little green area. The instructions don't say anything about cutting it, but I had to take a razor blade and cut that off because the cam will actually touch that. So and then the mechanism won't. It might fit in there. I just cut them off. No big deal. Just clearance it out, and away I went. Now we slide the shifter on there. You can't really go wrong with this. The little lever underneath the shifter, you can't really see it there. It's protruding down. You can see it down there, and there's a little kind of a ball thing, and it slides into the barrel on the shifter. And that red cam, you'll see in a second, we're going to put the shift plate back on there, put the shim on there. Now do it again. So I had the process down pretty much because I had to do this several times, and the only reason is to adjust the shift mechanism, make sure I hit every gear. And then once I hit every gear, that you'll see later, then I put actually a gasket maker on there and sealed everything up. But you know, learning as you go kind of thing, and taking my time. So now it's time to put the slider in place. Basically, just lean the shifter over a little bit and make sure that the detent, little leg that's on the shifter plate, goes between the arms on the barrel, the little protrusions on the barrel. One thing I have to say, this is all dry, so I did all this dry first, and to be honest with you, I maybe should have lubed up a couple of components that touch each other. Aluminum on aluminum never slides. It kind of, I don't know, kind of grinds itself together. So putting a little bit of lube on it probably would have helped when I was testing this once I get everything together. But just FYI, I think I'd put a little bit of lube on a couple of parts before I start hitting the shifter and making sure it pops into the gears, because it was much rougher before I put lube in there, gear lube. But anyway, I was just learning, trying to see how everything goes together and how everything's adjusted. So learning curve, I figured it out, and it's actually a very nice piece of equipment. So here's probably construction part 2 or 3 or 4 maybe.
when I was playing with it, I was putting everything together dry. I didn't really like that, so I took everything apart. I lubed up all the pieces that touch each other. Again, aluminum, anything with aluminum, it doesn't ride smoothly, so you have to lube it up or do something. But anyway, I was finding this a little bit frustrating because whatever I was doing with the shifter, I was able to engage whatever gear it's in, whatever the forks are doing right now. It was going forward and backward, but it wouldn't hop the gates from the gate 1, 2, 3, 4, and to 5, left to right. So I found that a little bit kind of weird, frustrating, until I started moving the shifter around. And when you do that, you have to, untighten the bolts, move it, tighten them back down, and see if you hit all the gears. And the effort it took for the shifter, it's not nothing. It's going to be better when it's in the car, but when it's on the table, it's kind of hard to engage. I'll say that. Everything's smooth, but it was harder than I expected. And the initial times I tried it, I could not get it to pop left or right. So I kept taking it apart. I even took the shim out one time, and then it started shifting. However, the shifter itself was not flat on the base plate. It was a little bit rocky, which means that the little leg that moves the barrel from left to right was bottoming out. So I did have to put the millimeter shift, the shim in there, and then you start tightening it around and moving the shifter forward and backward and a little bit to the left side of the tranny, and then it started working. Here you see me banging on it, and you don't see everything moving. It kind of like, it almost feels like it was stuck. I'll say that it wasn't stuck. I just didn't have the right, I think, wasn't freed up enough on the inside to make it go left to right. So I found it a little frustrating to do that. Again, I took it apart several times. Here I go again. And later on, it just started actually doing the thing because I moved the shifter to the proper position. And I think that's just the way it works on the barrel. It has to be free enough for it to spin the barrel, obviously, so you can go between the left or right shifts. So here you're going to see a little bit of frustration. I put everything together. I thought it was good. And then I start shifting, and the odd time I can't get all the gears, so I'm not sure what's cooking. I left the top plate off on the tranny so I could actually see the gear selection, so I know what's happening and when it's neutral and everything else. I was starting to get the hang of it, but here I'm standing there. You notice nothing. The plate's not on there. The outside plate's not on there. Cover rather. So I'm standing there trying to figure out what to do. And in a second you're going to see me shift and everything. It's going to work just fine. So I think it's the amount of effort you put into the shift itself. You can't just pull back smoothly. You have to kind of bang it. So that's a little different. So here I'm doing it, and I get all the gears. Everything's fine. I go back, and I did this several times. So I was a little bit confused on this, and I start moving the shifter around, and then I'm gonna have to break it open again and put silicone sealer on there so it's away from the elements. So. So I took the shifter off again to do final grease up and start sealing up the top plates with RTV. So you see me putting grease on stuff. There wasn't really anything in the instructions about that. I can't see how it would hurt anything unless the splashing from the tranny somehow will get in there, but I can't see it running dry. So I did what I did, put a little bit of grease everywhere, and I'm going to use RTV and seal up the top plate and put the shifter back on and make my final adjustments. So let's call this final assembly. So I got the lube on there, RTV rather, lube, and I'm buttoning everything up. Losing screws on the table. Yeah, I almost forgot to put the slider plate in there, or whatever that mechanism is called. It's done very nicely. It's got some ball bearing races and stuff, and it's pretty neat, bit of engineering. But anyway, it didn't go as quick or smooth as I was hoping, as I was saying earlier, but not a difficult process. I thought that cutting the tranny would be the worst part. and in all respects, it's the adjustment of the shifter so you have a very smooth transition between the gates. Left to right was the problem, not up and down. So once the left to right started working, the forward and backward work just fine, because the ratcheting part does that. And that base plate slides, that big red cam moves that around, and then the left to right is that detent on the bottom, the fork that rotates the barrel. So whatever the terminology is, that's what I'm using. But anyway, put it together, you know, before I put the top plate on the tranny and hide the cover. I wanted to make sure everything's working, and once it's working, I'm good to go. I clean everything up, and again, every time you have to assemble it, reassemble it, the adjustment goes off a little bit, so I had to play with it a little bit to make sure it worked 100%. You want to hit every gear all the time. So I was getting used to the amount of effort it took to hit the shifter. You can't just go smoothly like with a finger or anything. You have to, like, basically, I'll say bank shift it, which is the wrong terminology, but you have to move the lever pretty significantly. And if you watch videos of people driving a car with this shifter in there, that's pretty much how it is too. So these mechanisms, you know, transfer from H to all the stuff that happens inside the shifter itself, and they all require a little bit of effort. So it works pretty good though. I mean, I'll be impressed when the car's moving with the tranny in it. So I didn't videotape everything. I put the sensor on. I'm not sure how it wires yet. I'll research that. And they also tell you to put the kind of a block off at the end of the shifter and put pins, drill holes and put pins into the tranny so the shifter will not vibrate loose. So I did that. I didn't show that, but that's pretty straightforward too. It's that little silver block you see at the back of the shifter. So just for grins, the car is in, you know, fairly disassembled state. So the tranny goes up here. I used to have a Jerico right here, and the shifter was outside the tranny, so it took up about 2.5 extra inches, and the shifter went through that hole. So the new TKX, it's actually, shifter should be about this area right there. According to my measurement, this is the first time I, you know, put the shifter on and stuff, so I'm going to measure everything up and start cutting. This is just a plastic plate, and I have electronics here, so I have to take that all apart. And then of course slap it in here, do a cross trans brace, and see how everything fits. So this was a chore. You know, I moved the motor back 5 inches, so all this stuff is relatively took quite a bit of work, but everything's ready to roll. I just put the steering on it. It's 12-to-1. I'm waiting for some parts for joining everything up. Goes through the headers of that hole right there. You can even see in there, and everything's almost buttoned up. So doing the tie rods, waiting on them to come in, and then we'll stab the tranny in there and see how everything goes. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching that. The DKX, I was expecting a little smoother. I did have trouble, like I said, getting the cross shifts to work. They said if it's hard, shim it. Basically, I took the shim out, got it to do all the gears, but it was a little cocked over. So I put the shim back, tightened everything real nice, sealed it, and it's shifting, so everything's good. It takes a lot more force than I thought. It'll probably feel better when it's in the car, because I'm trying to hold the tranny in, hit the lever, and hopefully some of that'll maybe get a little smoother as it wears in a bit. Anyway, that's the end of that. Appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully it'll be real fun on the track. We'll find out later. Thanks. Bye. All right, figured I'd finish it with the proper sequence here. So they mentioned that you should put pins in through the case in case this vibrates loose a little bit, because you see how hard it is. Well, it's probably going to be easier when it's in the car, but you hit the left lever pretty hard, and vibrations and everything else. It possibly that these bolts will loosen up. I don't have Loctite on them, but I think that'd be one of my next steps as well. So these are just kind of tightened in, and then you have 2 pins, 6mm drill pop through there, and that's supposed to hold everything together during vibration and use. My car has everything solid mounted. There's no rubber and anything. The motor's hard mounted, tranny's hard mounted, diff is hard mounted, everything is. So vibrates a little bit, but it feels pretty good. So anyway, thanks for watching. Later, bye.